I'd like to thank Mr. Bauer for all the help he's given me in moving on to the next stage of my life. I wouldn't be able to do it without him.
I want to thank Mr. Mockmer for making class fun and exciting.
Alright, I'd like to thank Mr. Mockmer. He's one of my favorite teachers. I always walk into his class with a smile on my face and ready to learn, and his fun and interactive teaching.
Thank you, Mr. Mockmer, for always having a positive attitude.
And you've never hit me with anything yet, and I'm really glad you don't yell at me for being late to class every day.
I'd like to thank Swag Daddy Dimoff for bringing the short man swag to the school and influencing me a lot and being dead honest with me on everything in life. And I'd also like to thank Mrs. Stannett for bringing craziness and laughter into my life as well.
I'd like to thank Mr. Dimoff for being a really good teacher. He was probably the most serious teacher I've ever had in my life, and I really like that. I'd also like to thank Miss Babb for irritating me every single day of the week. No, I'm just kidding. But she was a really good teacher, and I really enjoyed her class.
I'd like to thank Miss Sampson for being an amazing teacher and also being my wife. You know, she made my high school career 10 times better, and I couldn't ask for a better woman to do that. And also I'd like to thank Mr. Kish. You know, anytime I'd feel down about myself, I'd go down to his office and I'd rough him up a bit, and it'd just make me feel amazing. Thank you.
I would like to thank Mr. Wren for helping me excel in my career in programming.
Thank you, Mr. Yoder, for helping us whenever need be and showing me I actually love business. Thank you, Mr. Davis, for being my biggest role model in my school career and for guiding all of your students along the way. You're the best.
I'd like to thank Mrs. Benedict for starting each and every morning out with a hug and a smile. And I'd like to thank Mr. Mockmer for giving me chocolate and letting me rant every single day.
Mrs. Babb, thank you for being so supportive and helping me through some really rough times. And Mr. Castles, thank you for being such a great teacher. You made me love psychology even more.
I'd like to thank Senor for making my high school experience the best it could possibly be.
I would like to thank Mr. Davis for being a great role model and Mr. Budman for being a great inspiration and coach.
I'd like to thank Coach Kish for coaching me and being a great guy and being around when I needed the help. And I'd like to thank Mr. Budman for being an awesome guy, always offering a hand whenever I needed it.
I want to thank Mr. Buggy for teaching me so much about art and getting me in an art field.
I want to thank Mr. Davis for being our great 6th grade teacher and always being fun and everything.
I would like to thank Mr. Davis for always being there and supporting every single student he had and taking his time and taking care of his students.
And I also want to thank Mr. Mockmer. Mockmer, good try trying to keep me in line. No matter how much stuff you throw at me, I'm still gonna swear.
I don't think Mr. Dimall. He was a hard teacher, but he actually did discipline very well. And he was a teddy bear, still. That's what I think.
Thank you, Mrs. Woolman and Mrs. Hino for helping me get to where I am today, and I couldn't do it without you both.
I'd like to thank Mr. Wren for helping me to pursue my interest in high school. And I'd also like to thank Mr. Zerby, who's been like a father to me throughout my high school career.
Gracias, señor, por 3 años de increíble español.
Thank you, Mrs. Paul Hamus, for making me feel at home. Thank you, Mr. Brinzer, for teaching me discipline.
We would like to thank Mr. Tagliaferri for making us run at 6 a.m. and teaching us hard work and discipline. We appreciate you.
I'd like to thank Mrs. Shaner for teaching me there is more than one way to skin a cat, and also Senor Odin for teaching me Espanol dos in my senior year.
I would like to thank Mrs. House for making me enjoy writing so much, and I would also like to thank Mr. Castles for giving me a 96 when I should have gotten a 100.
We'd like to thank Mrs. Shaner for being a great teacher
And always being positive, and for being our best friend.
Thank you, Ms. Remslender, for making my day every day. And thank you, Mr. Yoder, for helping me decide my college path.
Thank you, Mrs. Stannert, for teaching me my self-worth, and thank you, Mr. Wren, for helping me figure out what I'd like to do with my life.
I want to thank Mrs. Yerk for giving me the opportunity to help others in need, and I would like to thank Mr. Tamblin for preparing me for my science classes for nursing at Bloomsburg University.
I'd like to thank Mr. Yoder for being the amazing teacher that he is. Helps us with everything we do in his class, through his rigorous classes, and he gets us prepared for our lives after high school, gets us ready for college. And I'd also like to thank him for being the advisor for FBLA, putting us up with all of us for the weekend and all the stuff he does for us.
Firstly, I'd like to thank Mrs. Hess for probably being the nicest teacher that I've ever had.
Even when me and all my friends were goofing around the classroom, she'd always get us under control, but she'd always be really nice about it too. And I'd like to thank Mr. Dickey for always making jokes in the mornings and keeping the mood light in junior high, and then also introducing all of us to Bill and I. Thank you both.
I'd like to thank Mrs. Ham because she's always been that mother figure and she's always been there for me and she's always been one of my favorites. I'd also like to thank Mrs. Rumsnyder because she's also like that mother figure. She's always pushed me to work out even though I don't want to sometimes, but she's an amazing person. And I'd also like to thank Mr. Yoder for first of all dealing with me and for being the great teacher that he is.
I'd like to thank Mr. Wren for dealing with my crazy self for the past 3 years. You're an awesome dude and I don't know who I would vent my life problems to. I'm gonna miss you a lot.
Thank you, Mrs. Stannard, for always caring and acting like everybody's second mom.
And thank you for always making class fun and entertaining.
I'd like to say thank you to Mr. Bauer for always helping me with my college stuff. I wouldn't have been able to do it without you. And thank you to Mr. Burden for being my school-appointed friend for a day and always being a great teacher.
I'd like to thank Dr. Bauer for putting up with my honors English class because I know it was really stressful.
I would like to take time to thank Miss Babb for pushing me to get my scholarships done, get my work done, just get everything done for the year.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray, for making my last year of elementary school the best.
I'd like to thank Mrs. Babb for being one of the coolest teachers that I know.
I'd like to thank Miss Babb for making class so fun.
Davis for a great 6th grade year and preparing us for high school.
Thanks, Mr. Peterman, for making my 7th grade year so wonderful.
I'd like to thank Mr. Harmon and Mr. Barkley for helping me with every aspect of music.
We'd like to thank Mr. Tamblin for being a great teacher.
For being a great guy, and for helping us through all the years of chemistry. And we'd also like to thank Mr. Davis for being a good mentor
and helping us find where we want to go to college.
I would like to say thank you to Ms. Strauss. I've had you for 10th, 11th, and 12th, and for those 3 years you've helped me through a lot of other problems, and you've helped me get my schoolwork done.
I would like to thank Mrs. Brang for helping build my confidence as a child and helping me out through everything that has gone on in my life.
We'd like to thank Mrs. Strauss for teaching us so much in the greenhouse this year and making it fun.
I want to thank Mrs. Miller for getting me through Mrs. Babb's class and for always believing in me.
2 people I'd like to thank both Mr. Demoff and Mr. Burden. They're 2 very great guys who really helped me get into history, and they always wanted to make me come out of my shell. So I need to thank you guys for that.
I'd like to thank Mrs. Mallory for making 6th grade so much fun and Mr. Bauer for putting up with my stupid questions every day.
Thanks, Mr. Bauer, for saying I'm the loudest person you've ever met.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith, for helping me with my literacy skills and even helping me after Farrell. Thank you, Mrs. Arthur, for taking care of me at Farrell and sending me home when I was too shy to admit I was sick.
Thank you, Mr. Castles, for brightening up our day with your special brand of sarcasm.
I'd like to thank Mr. Castles for letting us do the 4 hours every 9 weeks.
I'd like to thank Miss Miller for supporting every single one of our sports teams here.
Thank Mrs. Ward, thanks for being such an awesome teacher.
Thank you, Mr. Castles, for making class fun.
Thank you, Mrs. Tanner, for making class fun.
Thank you, Mrs. Bittler, for allowing me to help your 3rd grade class for the past 2 years in the Big Buddy program. And thank you, Mr. Weigel, for preparing me for junior high prior to coming to Hughesville High School.
Thank you, Mr. Tiller, for proving to me that gym class doesn't always involve physical education.
Thank you, HB, for being such a great gym teacher to all of us.
And thank you for helping me get through high school because without you I wouldn't have made it.
Thank you, Mrs. Stannard, for being such a wonderful school mom to me. We want to thank Mrs. Holdren for being a good motivational teacher.
And also our teacher. You're always there.
I'd like to thank Mrs. Fuller for all that she's taught me and for making each year I've had her fun. I'd like to thank Mr. Bumman for not only making me a better athlete, but helping me become a better man.
We would like to thank Mrs. Fuller for being an amazing teacher and making math fun.
Thanks for always putting up with my crap and listening to me complain.
Hey, I'd like to thank Mr. Tui and Mrs. Strauss for always being there to help when they needed to be.
Okay, shout out to Matt Yoder for being the best business teacher ever and the best friend ever. And shout out to mi chica, Senora Odin, for making Spanish the funnest experience ever.
I want to thank Ms. McClintock for getting me very interested in science and opening up that whole experience for me. And I want to thank Mr. Lorson for really helping
helping me get through this year. It was a struggle and he helped so much. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Ms. Stanner for helping me get through my 10th grade year when I moved to Hughesville. I'd also like to thank Mr. Castles and Mr. Mockmer for keeping their classes pretty much interesting and always fun. I'd also like to recognize Mr. Tamblin for, even when there was almost no hope left for it, he never gave up on me and he pushed me to graduate.
Thank you, Mr. Burden, for encouraging me to become a better student.
Thank you, Mr. Buggy, for teaching me the importance of art.
And thank you, Mr. Castles, for always having an interesting class.
And not kicking us out, even though we deserved it.
We want to thank Mrs. Steele for always being sweet and helping us with our questions. And thank you for helping me pass math.
Alright, the two teachers I want to thank are Mr. Yoder and Duke for all they do in Hughesville High School.
I just want to thank Mr. Wren and Mr. Yoder for always brightening my day and being there for me, and to Remy for always making me do gym and being like a mother figure to me.
I'd like to thank Mr. Wren and Mr. Kish for a very enjoyable 4 years of high school.
Thank you, Mrs. Holdren and Mr. Buggy, for always supporting me and giving me constructive criticism when I needed it.
Thank you, Mr. Castles, for an awesome last period of your senior year.
Thank you, Mrs. Labatt, for being a great role model and awesome kindergarten teacher. Thanks, Mrs. Gardner, for always helping me out in preparation for college.
Thank you, Mr. Remsnyder, for letting me come to school every morning with a smile on my face. And thank you, Mr. Wren, for having a couple practice matches with me at 2K.
Hey, thanks for my cousin, Mrs. Easton, and thanks for everything I have done with you and yours. We need my life and my cousin and I love you. And thank you so much. Mrs. Works, thanks for everything. The first time I met you, it was awesome. So thanks again. Faggot. You're welcome. And Mrs. Woman.
As this video comes to a close, I'd like to thank those that made a contribution to it. First off, I'd like to thank Jake Beamer for collecting some of the footage of the seniors. He probably collected about half of them, and I really appreciate that. Also, I'd like to thank Mrs. Steele. She let me pull seniors out of her class, and I wouldn't have been able to get all of this done without her. Also, I'd like to thank Mr. Pollock for giving me the idea for this video. Also, Mr. Wren. He supervised the video and helped me edit it, and also for everything else that he's done for me in my senior year. Also, I'd like to thank all the seniors. They were very cooperative with this video. Many of them don't like being on camera, but I'm glad they did it for me. And finally, to all the teachers, on behalf of the class of 2016, I'd like to thank you because you had a huge impact on all of our lives, and we'll never be able to repay you. Thank you.